Peace and respect to you all. Welcome to Demolished Doctrine, the beginning of the end of religions. Tonight's free-form conversation with Mr. Richard Suttles. Mr. Richard Suttles, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Hi, thanks. Thanks, Richard. Thanks for having me. It was great to finally meet you. I was on a podcast with some other Marines on the Army and Navy, some military people for Veterans Day podcast for among Christians and atheists, and that's where I met you. And we noticed we had the same name and probably different, not ideologies, but different frameworks on how we interact with the world. So I think I immediately was like, oh, this is the kind of guy that I want to have a debate discussion with, and you agreed. So I'm glad that we have that opportunity.
Right on.
No, go ahead.
No. It sounded like you were done then. I thought maybe you weren't. So feel free.
Okay. I just want to say the only thing that I have is something on Facebook called the Faithiest Atheist. I do have a Twitter, but I rarely ever go to Twitter. I'm mostly on Facebook. And although I do have a YouTube channel, I haven't made any content yet. I don't really have time. I work in the counterterrorism world, and so I stay pretty busy. My big focus is on radicalization. So I've learned a lot about why people get radicalized. And so I like to talk about that. I like to talk about radicalization because I see that in among theists and atheists both. I think it's a human thing. I don't think it's something that religion makes happen. I think it's something that humanity makes happen, although it doesn't have to make it happen. And then you can be religious or anti-religious or apathetic to religion or ignorant of religion and still be very radicalized, very much a zealot. So that's what I really focus in. So when I interact on Facebook, usually I'm trying to present a less stringent, a less zealous theme and point out how we all kind of have this in common. That's really been my mission, more so than to build my own atheist ministry. Just to have a few posts on my Facebook page and kind of interact with other platforms and just kind of have fun when I have time to do it. That's really my only thing. And I don't have a website to sell other than Faithiest Atheist on Facebook. And I look forward to talking to anybody who likes to talk, and that's all I have.
Provided they can be reasonable.
Right. And even if not, I might be able to calm them down some. Sometimes I have some skills with that.
Very nice. Just for familiarity and for reassurance, an off-the-cuff definition of radicalized.
Okay. Yeah. I'm glad you brought this up because I think about this a lot. Someone who's radicalized thinks that there's some idea or concept or person, but there's something that is more important than anything else, and that the continuation of that thing is the highest priority in that person's life. And so far, so good. We should all be so lucky because there's so many people who are kind of apathetic and their big framework is to, leave me alone. Let me just do my thing. So when somebody has something that's really important to them, so far, so good. You're not radicalized. The thing that makes you radicalized is that you want to start either eliminating or dehumanizing, or you feel very polarized against everybody who doesn't agree. They have to agree on two things. They have to agree that your thing is the thing, and they have to be willing to put that thing over their own individual well-being to the point where they'll demonstrate that. So not only do I think this is the most important thing, but watch me give, half my paycheck to this thing, or watch me throw my kid into this volcano.
Right.
That kind of dedication, that kind of zealotry, which I think if enough people in a group are willing to do that, then that group can outcompete other groups. So that's why sometimes evolution rewards, and again, I'm an atheist, so I'm going to be all evolution. But the reason why I think natural selection rewards zealotry is that if a whole group of people, even if they're terrible people, if they work together, they can outcompete other groups. They might dominate a whole culture or a whole geographic area for generations just because they work together better. And they all believe in the continuation of this idea. And even though an individual might be sacrificing himself, that might not be good for him. The fact that so many are willing to sacrifice something for that thing as a group, the group continues, even though each person, in game theory wise, on the individual level, game theory wise, it's ridiculous because you end up dying for something and your genes don't get passed on. But if your group is focused around an idea, then that idea gets passed on. And that's why I think we're zealots sometimes. And so that's someone who's radicalized, where they not only are they willing to, there's one more caveat to this too. So not only do they think it's more important, they're willing to sacrifice something for that, and then they start to hate people who aren't willing to sacrifice something on their behalf. That's someone who's radicalized. And then I just also want to say, like, if someone's radicalized towards living in peace, and they're like, I don't care if you kill me, I'm just going to go live in peace, and I'm willing to die for this cause for peace, then you're not evil. It's probably more irrational. It's probably not feasible. But so when I say radicalized, I don't automatically mean some horrible terrorist. It's just a mindset that kind of owns you. So that's what I mean when I say radicalized.
Yeah, the more zealous and religious a Jainist is, the less violent they are.
I see. That's I guess for me it depends on what their thing is that they want to push.
Yeah, well, I don't know all of their agendas,
right?
But on a personal practitioner level, that seems to be the consensus on that. Okay, so today we're going to do like a free form conversation about the difference between a claim's confidence and a claim's veracity. That is to say, whether or not I believe a thing may or may not be important, but the important thing in a statement is how true is the statement itself. And things like how do we know whether or not a statement is true? How do we judge truth values? What theory of truth does a person use in application to information? These kinds of ideas. What theory of truth does? I was getting an echo for a moment, and then you fixed it.
Okay, yeah,
you're probably aware of that, right?
Yeah, I had some kind of an echo, and I think it was because the YouTube link was on, so I went and muted the YouTube link.
Okay.
But I heard what you said about veracity, how we know a truth claim is true. I heard that.
Okay, so I would if you wanted to start off, you're more than welcome. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, I would make an assertion about my stance and its truth value, not just my confidence in that. Okay. As far as the existence of a God, what a God is, things like that, or if you had something you wanted to start off with, we'd start off with your idea.
You're probably going to hate my idea, because I think that a lot of our surrounding conditions influences how certain we are and how confident we are in something, even to the point where we think I'm not doing any analysis. This is now arriving to me in pure reason. I've discovered it in the same way I've discovered the sun. And so I think that I think we can fool ourselves on this. Even when we're talking about it like you and I are, I think we can fool ourselves. So I'm going to be doing like a tricky, it's both and it's neither kind of thing. So you might want to go first, because mine's going to be kind of wishy-washy.
I don't think that makes it wishy-washy, but okay. But I think I understand what you're saying. And if I don't, I'll try to adjust as I go, as you go.
Okay.
Okay. So although I wouldn't agree with the possibility of the existence of the quad omni God, because it's logically incoherent and self-defeating, that Christians claim, I don't see the Bible claiming that. But instead, what I see is Christians are normally conflating two different terms from within the text and thinking it means the same thing.
Let's see.
Where statements like, call none the Father but God, making the Father God, but then differentiating, saying the Father can speak, the Father can interact with other consciousnesses and interact with physical reality, whereas the description of God is spirit, and lists the spirits, and several, not all of the repercussions are listed, but several of them are listed, that if you follow that set of spirits and or ideals, i.e. social structures, you would have to act in certain ways because you believed those certain things were true, or you naturally would act in those ways if you believed those certain things were the utmost thing. So this kind of circles right back around to what you were saying about zealotry and what it means to be radicalized. So it's it's literal self-admission of those who agree with that they are radicalized, but the result is a positive instead of a negative impact on self, society, people surrounding, friends, etc., family, all those sorts of things. So I would assert that there's a difference, first of all, between what Christians are saying about the text and what the text says about itself, that they're accidentally, not purposefully, conflating terms from within the text where God is spirit, but the Father has being and personage.
Okay.
And let me just stop right there because it's going to get to be too much too soon.
Okay. Just going for the quad omnis, my view as to why people eventually, or even originally, began to think of any God as all of everything, all knowing, all powerful, is that we're competitive. My thing is greater than your thing, and you say, okay, well, my thing is greater than your thing. Okay, well, what can your thing do? Well, he can make mountains. Well, mine knew that the mountain was going to be there. Well, mine knew that the planet was going to be here. Oh, well, mine knew the universe was going to be here. Oh, yeah, well, mine made the universe. And then pretty soon you get to the point where, give me a word, power. Okay, mine is all of that. Give me a word, knowledge. Mine is all of that. And so I think that's where the quad omni comes from. And when people in scripture, and again, I'm an atheist, I think when people were talking about God, sometimes they were like, he's all of everything because he's God. And I think you're right. I think, can he be all knowing if there's logical impossibilities? And, some apologists say, well, if it's logically impossible, then it doesn't matter. I would say, if he's all powerful, it could matter. So I do think they're contradictory. And I just think that we got to that quad thing because we're competitive. And so we just want our God to be all of everything. So that's how I think the quad omni came to be.
I would agree with you. This is nothing more than two 7-year-old boys on the playground saying my dad's bigger.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. And my support from within the text that they're referring to is that every knowledge claim, every power claim, every creation claim, every claim of benevolence, every claim of presence, all the quad omnis and more are qualified by the next following set of verses saying what it's talking about.
Okay.
I am able to ABC. Okay, fine. Does that make you able to all the way E through Z? Well, no, it wasn't even claimed.
Okay.
And that's the case in all of them. Like, for instance, if I said that I was really into biology and I'd studied hairs and I study your particular hairs and I'd studied how many hairs you have. And then because of that, I said, I knew every hair on your head.
Right.
Well, that sounds impressive unless it's only on your head.
Right.
So when it claims of the psalmist David, I know every hair on your head, that doesn't, you can't extend that to I know every hair on everyone's head. And that's basically what the Christians have done.
I agree with that. However, I might push back and say that the person who wrote that did think of God that way, whether it's the case or not. Or at least I could see a pathway as to why he would think that, because he wants to present God as that powerful. But let's just say that that's God actually talking to us and he doesn't mean that, then I can see what you mean.
Right. So I don't see any actual claim of that, of any of the quad omnis, only that all of the knowledge, presence, power, benevolence are situational, and qualified by situation. So I just don't see that claim myself. Okay, so how can we find a way to critique my position on what God is? I suppose first, and I would critique your position on what God is. So first, I would put the onus on myself and say that God is a set of social structures, and that those are listed in the text, the Bible, and that those are wisdom, knowledge, counsel, understanding, fear, power, and conservation.
Okay.
And that is what God is those social structures, just like we have social structures like how is it stated? Gosh, all of a sudden I'm stuck on a phrase that I know very, very well.
That happens to me a lot.
The pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness.
Right.
Is part of social structures that we have established for this country. That
right.
is, it's always legal for you to pursue those things.
Right.
Right. As basic human rights and as a broad overview of a set of social standards. What do you think so far?
Right. And this is what I'm, again, for my atheist, I try to think of the world in terms of anthropology. And I think the reason that cultures of humans did so well is because of those social structures. Those social norms became like moral and epistemic frameworks, like stepping stones or footholds. And everybody agreed, these are universally true. These aren't just things that were, like. These are universally true. Whether they are or not is another thing, but they behaved as if they were. Right. And those became social structures. So even now we have people that say that, we have Christians usually called dominionists now who say that God gave us the pursuit of happiness and as an actual right that must be continued. That's what I'm talking about. And by the way, if someone's idea that needs to be continued is something that's helpful for everybody, then I'm okay with it. But I'm just saying that might not actually be a universal truth. I'm all for it when it's helpful for people, and then I step in and start scrutinizing when I don't think it's helpful for everybody.
Right.
But that's what I think. I think the social norms are the secret of our success, and so maybe Absolutely. It's because God gave it to us, or maybe because they emerged because they had to. However that came to be. I'm not a stickler for how for whether there's a God or not, but I do think that those social structures are very important to our existence.
So this may take some creativity on your part. Maybe you haven't even really considered this. What is the minimum that you could call a God?
Like if I interacted with one, or just philosophically thinking about it.
Yeah, not so much what would impress you to convince you that a being were God.
Mm-hmm.
But what is the minimal things you would accept as a definition for a being that could be called God?
Yeah, and I would only caveat that by saying, this is us thinking about it, and I have to start with saying our ideas, our analyses are all kind of based on us and our limitations. So, maybe my description would make, let's say that we're all part of an alien experiment. There's an alien college that started us, and they're just watching us and writing reports on what we do. And so they're laughing at my answer right now. But I would say something that could create the universe, create us, know what we're thinking inside, know what's going to happen. That kind of stuff would be, and I know that's, getting into the omnis, but that kind of stuff is what I would think of. And by the way, I could see something that could do that and still not know everything. He just knows how to create universes and knows us. Just like that cosmic university. Like I like to think if there's a cosmic university of aliens who created us, and every class they do it, they create a universe, and for us it's 14 billion years, but for them it's an hour. So towards the end of the hour, they watch and see what humanity does and takes notes. For me, that's what I think of. But that doesn't mean that just because an alien group could create us and know what we're going to do and know us all the way on the inside, that doesn't mean they know everything. It just means they have more powers than we do. So something that has more powers than we do is really how I would think of would be a God.
Okay. All right.
And also, I want to say one more caveat. I don't know that there would ever be an end to it. So like even if I met the kind of God that a lot of apologists talk about, like he was the Alpha and the Omega, and And so I meet that God, and he shows me how he created everything. And he's like, there's nothing outside of me. I don't know of any way that could disprove the idea that another God would come into that realm and say, hey, I told you to say that. I made you to think that. And then the God that's talking to me is like, well, what the hell's going on? And the guy goes, yeah, I know. I'm introducing myself to you. And I made you think that you did this, but really it was me. And that could just keep going infinitely backwards.
Right.
So not that I'm saying that there's an infinite backwards cause. I'm not getting into that philosophy. I'm just saying we wouldn't be able to determine, no matter what evidence we were given, there's nothing that would make me say, okay, this is the final point, because who's to say another God could step in and say, hey, what are you guys talking about? So I want to throw that out there too.
What if I say, for instance, that, I don't know, on this earth, maybe 1,000 years from now, and technology advancing at the rate that it is, at the exponential rate that it is now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a lab worker. I'm a science guy, right? And I make a combination of genetics from living creatures on this planet.
Right.
I recombine them in an interesting way that I think I'm going to get a certain result from.
Okay.
Now I take that genetic material and I clean out, I remove all the genetic material from a viable ovum in one of our living females.
Okay.
Because it's hard to recreate a womb. We might not even have that in 1,000 years, but
we'll see.
And I inject this material into a working, living ovum.
Okay.
And I put it where it needs to be, and it starts doing its thing. It starts replicating. It's now fertilized.
Right.
And I created something that did not exist before.
Right. Okay. I'm with you.
That would make it the first of its thing.
Yeah. And in that case, that might make you at least godlike. At least it would put you in the history books. So yeah, you're creating a brand new thing that hadn't existed before. You're using other.
I don't really want it to be that special, actually.
Well, you're using other organisms, and you're using your creativity, adding your creativity and your skills, and you've created something new. So we'll just at least say super amazing.
Well, let's just say that 1,000 years from now, you can apply for permission to do this from the government, and they'll if you check all the boxes, they'll let you do that. Just for instance.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm with it.
Nothing unusual at all about that. Nothing amazing, actually.
Okay.
So it would be then the first of its kind.
Okay.
And I would be its creator,
right.
But I'm not the same thing it is.
That's right.
Okay.
I see it.
So I actually see that's what's being claimed in the text of the Old Testament is exactly that situation. I didn't just make that up. Which would not be an infinite regress unless you want to ask where the scientist came from.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
But it's not an infinite regress in claiming and righteous claim and a right to claim.
Right.
Because every descendant of that original, I say I made a female and then I made a male, and they're able to reproduce. All of their descendants from that point, if I trace them back, they're going to go back to that male-female set as the first of their kind. And everything before that is going to be animals that I extracted genetic material from to create that.
Right. Because honestly, our DNA is so similar to other animals. There's so much of our DNA in other animals. So technically that goes back to my cosmic university where the aliens created us.
Well, sort of.
That could be the same thing. They created us and they're just watching us to see, what we do.
Okay. I think I want to let this naturally shift. How studied are you? What's your background and familiarity with Old New Testament Bible?
I was raised Christian, and then, at some point I began to think we made it all up. So I let that go. And so there was a lot that I learned when I was younger. But once I began to see Facebook as about the same, once I began to see the Bible as pretty much the same as Facebook, then I stopped reading it because in my mind, it's just like Facebook. And again, this is my view, and I know a little bit about your testimony. In my view, the people who wrote the Old Testament and the New Testament believed what they were writing, but it was just like Facebook. It was posts for how they thought they saw things. And then, Bob's might not match Mike's, but Bob meant it and Mike meant it. And then, maybe Sam came along later and said, I'm going to change Bob's and I'm going to tweak Mike's because that makes it a little bit more coherent. That's how I see the Bible. I realize that, apologists would tear that up. And I realize, I don't know if your audience knows that, as I understand it, you had an experience that makes you think that that the Old Testament is real and that you actually were able to witness some of those events, or at least see aspects of it to make you think this was dead serious. This really happened. So I know that's your view, but from my view, not
that it really happened on this planet.
Okay, I see. All right.
That would be a misunderstanding.
Okay, good. And you can clarify that. I just heard you talk about how you had this experience where you had seen David and Goliath, or at least been at the setting of where David and Goliath took place. So I know a lot of the stories, but I can't say that I'm well read, because at some point I began to see the Bible that way, so I let that go.
I'm not sure how many fully evolved human minds, which is what I think the case is.
Mm-hmm.
What I could say it fully evolved.
Okay.
At a medical biological absolute limit of intelligence and efficient use of the mass called the brain, something like that.
Right.
I don't know how many it would take to create a movie. I don't know how many beings that would take.
Right.
So it could have been one, and it could have been more than one acting cooperatively. I don't have an answer for that.
Right.
But essentially what happened was something not me played a movie in my head.
Okay.
It was just like watching a movie.
Right.
It was very much like that.
But it was like interactive too, because you weren't just watching it, you were feeling it.
I felt parts of it. There were parts of it where I was literally in outer space with no protective gear on.
Right.
And was able to breathe, which is obviously impossible.
Right.
And there were times that I was closer to some moons over some planets in our near solar system. And I have better photos in my head than NASA has of those same objects.
Right. I remember that also as part of your testimony, that the two things that stood out is that you saw things about the Old Testament that you had never read in the Old Testament. And then you had seen things out in space that NASA hadn't taken pictures of. So that, like, if NASA had a blurry picture of a moon over Jupiter, you would, before you even heard what it was, you would say, "Oh, that's Ios," because I've been there. So the fact that you could see something that NASA hadn't discovered, and you could see something in the Bible that you hadn't read yet, was evidence that you had a legitimate experience that made you think, that the Bible is true.
Well, it certainly makes me feel that at a bare bones minimum,
right.
I can't have made it up,
right?
Because I personally just didn't have that information.
Right. Yeah, I remember that from your testimony, and I'm not the kind. I've seen so much weird stuff that I'm not the kind. I know you're talking to one atheist who he was like, "It's got to be drugs. It's got to be. You've learned about this," and I'm not like that at all. I could legitimately have been that way. I'm not one to judge, because I've seen enough weird stuff myself that it could be that way. But I will say, if there's like a higher level mind that created us, that mind is perfectly okay with either messing with us or just kind of randomly picking people and saying, "I'm going to show you, but not the others," which is fine, because it's his prerogative. But that's just a thing about it that frustrates me, that it would do something like that. So I'm not the kind to think that somebody's making it up. I'm more like the kind to think it's unexplainable, but at the same time, if it is a God, this God is picking people, and that's kind of cruel from my perspective. Although you might not feel like you've been harmed, but to me it just seems cruel.
depends on your definition of violence and what can and cannot be justified within whatever subjective morality you cling to, doesn't it?
Right. And again, exactly. My whole thing is that we make up our moral and epistemic sacred norms. So you're absolutely right. When I say that's cruel, I'm appealing to my own personal religion. Even as an atheist, I'm appealing to my own personal religion. That's right.
That's extremely honest of you and a little bit weird, and I really like it.
It's the Richard. There's something about the name Richard.
There's something about the name Richard. It must be. Okay, so so you probably are fairly familiar. You may have forgotten some details.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Of the story of Moses.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I know that not royalty, but left in a reeds and picked up by royalty. Adopted by royalty, raised in royalty. Became his own form of royalty, although not a king, and then had his problems with that family, and then went on to lead the people out of sometimes I get them mixed up with other ones, but before Joshua, led him out of Egypt and didn't go into the promised land before Joshua took over. So I know that much.
Okay, all right. So Moses survived birth by being sent down the river in a tar-lined basket.
Right.
Sent by who and why?
I don't remember. I just remember that he was found by a princess, but I don't remember why he was sent down there.
Okay, mom did it.
Okay.
And by the way, that's stupid.
It's stupid for her to have done that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you put a baby in a tar-lined wicker basket and send it down the river. That's lunch for something. That's what that is.
Right. Yeah. It was either desperation or extreme ignorance on her part.
Or maybe both.
Right.
Could be both. Let's not eliminate one.
Yeah.
Moses was part of if we can necessarily eliminate it, that's fine. But if we can't, we have to keep it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Moses was part of a birthing where the eldest of them was 3 years old.
Okay.
You remember that?
No.
The oldest ones get to 3, and Herod could be not Herod. I'm bad with names. Orders the slaughter of all the newborn males.
I remember that.
That's what he's being rescued from by mom's rash decision.
Ah, okay. I see it. Makes sense.
So she kept him hidden for a while and could hide him no more, sent him down the river.
Right. Okay. That ties that together because I remember that from Sunday school.
Okay. And as you said, his own problems aside, he grows up amongst the royalty, the Pharaoh and his family. And in fact, the princess that you quoted is the daughter of Pharaoh in the story.
Okay.
But you might notice she never asked permission to keep the baby.
Yeah, and I had never thought of it. I'd never gotten immersed in enough to the story to actually ask that question or wonder why.
Right. So actually, it's one of her servant girls who recommends that there's a lactating Ebru or slave class.
Okay.
Which she's the older sister of Moses who's saying it and talking about their mom.
Okay.
That's who she's talking about when she says, I know a Hebrew that's lactating.
Okay.
Okay, so he's born late in the cycle. He's very young when he's sent down the river. The princess picks him up, never asked for permission to keep him. The older sister of Moses says something that's also not too bright. And if the princess didn't really want to keep it, she would have logicked her way and said, oh, this is the mother of this child.
I see. Okay.
But she never did that because she wanted it to be okay.
Right. Okay.
Or she herself was very, very stupid.
I see that.
Okay. So he grows up in amongst Pharaoh and royalty, as you said, and they put him in charge of some portion of government.
Okay.
Now, that, I don't know about you, but to me, that sounds like a really controversial thing to do.
Yeah, the fact that he's adopted, it does. And again, my atheistness says, well, there was other stories about Moses where he had more power. There are other people who wrote about Moses, or somebody like Moses who was adopted into royalty, who was the full leader. So I'm like, it could be that part of the narrative made its way into this, so that he's not a pharaoh, but he's just got some power. That gives him some respect. So for me, it'd be an element of a storytelling.
No, I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't verify nor refute the story.
Absolutely,
it's a repeating element within several religions. That's fine with me.
Right. Yeah. He could be an absolute person who lived, and just the fact that there's a bunch of stories that are similar to it does nothing to that, fact.
Okay. Now here's the part that would really twist a Christian's brain.
Okay.
You can't have 100% males born. You would have females.
Right.
Just statistically, you would end up with some females.
Right.
There's no female as any part of this story.
Yep.
Okay. And when I consider what would make something a not viable slave, because when you're a slave holder, what do you want? More slaves.
More slaves.
That's what you want.
Yep.
But there's certain reasons why you wouldn't accept a slave as a slave.
Right.
Have any for instances?
Well, again, going back to the story of Moses, if the Pharaoh saw reason to think of Moses more as a son or as a relative than a slave, maybe that could be a reason why.
Sure. And what would cause him to think that way about something that came from the slaves?
I can't think. I can't think one.
Well, how about respect?
Yeah, respect can be good. Like Moses does something that he respects or admires.
Right.
Okay.
And then because of that, a relationship builds and some trust is attributed.
Okay.
By Pharaoh to Moses, obviously, or he couldn't be in charge of anything.
Right.
Okay. So it was the Pharaoh's opinion, obviously, that this thing was trustworthy.
Mm-hmm.
And that it could handle being in charge of some stuff.
Right.
And obviously it was intelligent.
Right.
Okay, does that sound like it would make a good slave?
I guess no, because if you want to have a slave, you want the slaves to be, not to be creative and just to be obedient. So if someone can be helpful to you in a different way, then use them in a different way. And again, saying that makes me sound terrible, but I can just put myself in the mindset of someone who's looking at people like property.
Terrible. Yeah. If you were looking at a living being as property, like we do at cows,
right?
If you're looking at it that way, and you ended up with, let's say you did some experimentation in selective breeding, and you ended up with a cow that was too smart. Well, now you don't want to kill it.
Right.
Now you don't want that as a cow.
Right. It's like Charlotte's Web.
Right. That would be horrible.
They wanted to save Wilbur because Charlotte was making words out of the web.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. It caused a moral conundrum within the human class, and they had to change their minds about things.
Right.
Right. So that's the last thing a slave owner or a farmer would want in their slave animals.
Right.
That would be the last thing they'd want. Is intelligence to the point where you could actually have a relationship with them and a sense of trust in them. That's the last thing you want in a slave.
Right.
Okay. Now, what's the youngest age that we, make rudimentary estimations of human intelligence?
I mean, now?
Yeah.
I guess now we have like grades and IQ tests and social skills.
So what's the youngest that we, try to estimate IQ of a human being?
I mean, honestly, I think even before preschool at this point.
That's right.
Yeah. Before preschool, we start to do it.
Yeah. We can take a 3-year-old
mm-hmm.
and give them a series or put in front of their face or give them to review themselves or let the adult hold the photos of human faces.
Right.
And say you have 10 photos of different human faces.
Right.
Even if the child can't talk, hasn't mastered speech yet, to say, "Oh, that I've seen that face," or something that means something like that.
Right.
You'll when they see a repeating face, they'll look away because now they're bored.
Right.
They want something. They want new information, not repeat. They don't give a crap about the repeat.
Right. They're
So,
getting bored.
so some kids can see that in 10 pictures. Some kids can see that in 1,000 pictures. Some kids can see that in 3,000 pictures of faces.
Wow.
As soon as you start to repeat it, they go, "I've seen this. I'm done with you."
Right.
They'll
Okay.
look away.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's an IQ test for a person that can't even really talk yet.
Right.
Because we're hardwired to recognize human faces.
Right.
So you can estimate how intelligent a kid is just showing them human faces, one right after the other, right after the other.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah. You have to give enough time for their eyes to do the calculations of memorizing the face, and then you change the picture.
Right.
As soon as they're done with that.
And I know I've read a few books by a guy named Michael Tomasello who worked a lot with kids, and he was testing like social skills. He was testing at what age, if he walked up to a closet with his arms full of boxes and he was like pushing up against the closet, at what age would the kid jump up and pull open the closet? And some at age 3 would immediately do that, and some would sit and stare and think about it, and some would get bored and walk away. So even that sense of social connection, you can test at a really young age, even before they can talk.
So what I'm asserting in all of that is that by the time they were 3, they knew that the babies were 3. They knew what they were dealing with.
Right. And I'm thinking of, there's times where somebody's a late bloomer and might surprise the world after they turn 10, but I see what you're saying. Statistically saying they had a good idea that someone was ahead of the game at age 3. I'm with that.
Okay, so I think that's good reason for them to kill them.
You mean like why? Oh, they might kill a slave because they're showing too much promise?
Yes.
Yeah, I absolutely believe that sort of stuff happened. You want them to be productive to you, and you don't want them to be a threat to you. So yeah, I can see how that happened. Horrifying, but I can see how that would happen.
That was funny. That's pretty good. It's worth a read.
Oh,
can you read that?
Oh yeah. I don't admire people who throw babies away, but I admire babies that survive. Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see what they're saying.
I love a good humanist. Okay, so I have some questions based on those very, very simple observations.
Okay.
That are just evidently true in the text. Now, it seems obvious to me why you wouldn't want a slave, first, physically disabled or severely mentally handicapped, but you also wouldn't want one that's like close to your intelligence. That would not be good.
Right.
Okay. And then I have questions like, why does it make such a point of all Egyptians being evil when you can't say that about any person group? How could it be only males are born in the birthing cycle from 3 years down?
Right.
Why is the conflict between Moses and the slave keepers accented by Moses saying, "Wait a minute, I came from that, didn't I?"
Right.
And why is that a problem for Moses? What do you think of all that?
Well, I guess on an individual level, if he's thinking, would I rather be a slave? Would I rather be in conditions of a slave? Or would I rather be living royalty? Obviously, he's going to want to be in royalty. He's going to want to have access to more, opportunities. So there's just that. But to realize that he has a connection with the slaves and maybe decide he has a responsibility for their well-being, so that connection might make him think, this isn't a group of people I can leave behind. I have a right, I have a responsibility. So it becomes like his sacred thing to take care of them, or to have their interest in his heart.
Okay, so here's my assertion from within that story.
Okay.
It didn't happen here. That's why we have no evidence for it.
Oh, it didn't happen on this planet, or it didn't happen in Egypt?
Right. It didn't happen on this planet at all.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that it's not talking about an incident of 100% births of males.
Okay.
That in order to accomplish something like that, for something like that to happen at all, unless there was some kind of genetic defect where that entire populace only made males, which means they're dead.
Right.
They're soon dead after that. 2 generations and they're toast.
Right.
That it was actually genetic experimentation that was being done, and that's why it was 100% males.
I see.
And if you were doing experimentation with a subclass, a slave class of beings, that would describe why they're not as smart as you, why you don't respect them, why you don't respect autonomy in them, and that you look at them as if they aren't equal to you, i.e. Pharaoh and slave.
Right. Yeah, I see that. And I can imagine a deity or a god that's like that. Someone who
and since you brought that up.
Yeah, I can very easily. In fact, if aliens came down and said, there is either a god or gods, and you need to tell us right now what type of qualities that god has, I would say it's likely that they're messing with us, or that they see us as some sort of cattle, or some sort of thing to to mess with or to study, rather than they hope that we flourish or whatever. Our well-being is their number one care or whatever.
If there's no vested interest, I would default to your position. So
Right.
That logically makes sense to me, what you just said there. Okay. So,
and I can see
interesting. Sorry.
I can just see how many Christians right now would be screaming their heads off at you and saying,
yes, freaking
my
out.
God is a loving
That's
God.
Right.
My Jesus would hate your Jesus. Okay.
Here's the problem with that when they say that.
Right.
Some scholars say that they'll say Elohim and then Yahweh.
Right.
Because there's a distinction there. You're familiar?
I'm familiar with that. Yeah.
Okay. Would you be familiar with what the word Elohim means?
It's been so long since I've read this, but it seemed like at one point the idea of a plurality of gods
yes
was available with one of them, and then a singularity was only available for the other one, and so
that's correct.
So it's been a while, but that's how I remember it.
That's pretty good considering your interest level.
Yeah,
and I appreciate your patience speaking to that interest level.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Hebrew word for a singular powerful being, like a king,
mm-hmm.
or a demigod or a god,
right,
is Eloah.
Okay.
The plural form of that is Elohim.
Okay.
So it literally means plural powerful beings. It means powerful beings.
Okay.
Here's the interesting part. Part of the definition of Elohim is that it could be benevolent, could be malevolent.
Right.
It's nondescript. You have to get that from context.
Right. They're not automatically assuming loving grandfather type.
Right. You can't assume that in the word Elohim.
Right. Okay.
And there is no Yahweh until after Adam.
Right. I've got one book, God, it's, got to be 10, 15 years old now, where a biblical scholar, I'll have to go find it, but he talks about that. He talks about, and his view is just two different authors. The one set of authors thought of God in terms of Elohim, and another set of authors thought about God in terms of Yahweh.
I'm going to back him up on that to some extent and then argue with parts of it.
Okay.
So I think what's going on here in an internal critique is that you have a very, very, very brief synopsis of the class. And then as it goes on, it gets into greater detail per topic.
Okay.
And that because Moses is the first of his kind, the only survivor,
Okay.
and Adam is the only survivor,
Right.
and Moses is the giver of rest,
Okay.
and that Adam ascended, being into heaven, would be in the position to offer rest,
Right.
that this is all one story.
Okay.
So I think Moses is just detail on how Adam started out. And all of this to address the infinite regress possibility.
Okay.
Because I think what's being described is something not human evolved in some neosynthetic, Darwinistic kind of an evolutionary process on some planet.
Okay.
When it got technologically developed enough to start messing with genetic material, it started messing with genetic material because it could.
Right.
What did it do? It made its own life easier.
Okay. Right. Which is what we do.
Of course we do.
Yeah.
Okay. But it uses existent genetic material to create a hybrid that would be made of all that same genetic material.
Right.
But there'd be something significantly different about the hybrid.
Right.
And that it would have something that the rest of the stuff doesn't have.
Right. Like us.
Like the number 2 fusion.
Right.
For instance, I don't know if that's the answer, but it's something like that.
Right.
Resulting in something that is significantly different than everything else before it. But unfortunately unacceptable as a slave.
Because it has too much potential than the creator imagined or planned on. Okay.
Right. So I really take Elohim there as being the scientists from that planet.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And so like when it says, let us make man in our image, was their original intent to try and make us more like them, but they did better than they hoped?
Thought they would.
Yeah. And then they got scared and threatened by that.
Of course they would, wouldn't you?
Which is what we would do if we tried to make AI, like in the movies. We want to make humans that do what we want, but then what if those humans decide they want to, have their own, free will, right?
Yeah, we've even considered this in art.
Yeah.
So.
And being an atheist, I'm completely, let's say that you and I have this discussion and then tonight, beings come to me and give me a waking dream or an experience. And they're like, he was right. And, now that you're open to it, and that's not what happened to you because you weren't expecting it. But no, I'm just saying, if that were to happen to me, I'd be like, oh, okay, so that's what happened. I'm the kind of guy that if I were to meet the creator, well, I'd be terrified, but it's at some mental level. I would try to, what's that?
I don't think you would be terrified.
Well, I would, I'm sure I'd freak out to a degree because it would be unusual, but on some mental level, I would shrug because I would say, there had to be something. Even though I'm an atheist, I'm like, there has to be some reason that I can think about this. And maybe it's all a cosmic accident, but I kind of agree with you that there's a whole lot of stuff that would have to happen, which I can't even fathom. So because it intuitively seems like there might be something, if I were to meet that creator, then I would say, oh, okay, so that's it. But then I would also tell the creator, I'd be like, you realize that I'm never going to be able to convince other people. It doesn't matter how convinced I am. And then that creator will be like, yeah, well, dude, that's your problem. I'm just messing with you. Then I would be like, okay, well, cool. Okay, I got it.
I really like your attitude. I've many times said, and will probably say again many times, the person who would most easily accept heaven as described in these stories, is the crystal rubbing flake.
Yeah.
Who holds a sign standing on top of the Eiffel Tower saying, aliens, come take me away. I'm ready. Right.
Yep. You're right. Because that's what would happen.
I think that's pretty much what it's trying to describe. Yeah. This surprises me, but I've been talking a lot. We're coming up on an hour.
Wow.
So I hope you're surprised too. That means the conversation went well.
Right, it is, and I'm glad I had watched a couple of your videos because I was trying to get an idea. When I saw Demolished Doctrine, I was like, oh, he's an atheist who hates religious people, or not hates, but is determined to bring down religion or something.
I am determined to bring down religion. That is
Right,
what I'm trying to do.
as we know it. But then you introduced yourself as a Christian in another video, and I'm like, well, who is this guy? So I watched a couple of videos, and I got enough to kind of guess that we would, have a conversation like this. So I'm glad you did most of the talking, because I wanted to understand that better.
Cool. Okay. Well, let's tentatively say you're welcome anytime.
Thanks.
I've enjoyed your openness, if nothing else. I can certainly say that you are not a closed person who are locked into some certain idea set, and congratulations on that.
Thank you. And if any of your guests want to debate somebody who's wants to talk about how people get radicalized and what to do about it, it doesn't have to be a debate. It can be a discussion. My biggest thing is to take people who hate other groups and try to bring them back, especially like a apologist who's like, these atheists, look what they're doing in China, or an atheist who's like, look what these religious people are doing at the Westboro Baptist Church. Sure. I'd love to try to get somebody like that and say, you're right. You're right that that's an example of bad behavior, but you're pushing that on too many other people, and that's affecting how you live your life. So I'm really good with that kind of discussion. If anybody wants to.
On that,
yeah.
And someone may take you, if you just made an open table offer, you contact me, I'll put you in touch. So that makes me want to ask you, I'm looking at you and I'm saying skeptical, not cynical, open but harsh.
Yeah.
From what I can tell so far, and I'm not saying I know you really well, you seem to be interested in what logic is and how to follow it. Would you share your opinion on the BITE model?
The what kind of model?
BITE.
BYTE?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
I don't know it. I'm not familiar with it.
Okay. All right. Well, that's also an honest answer.
Maybe we'll have a discussion later about that. But when it comes to logic, I'm a big fan. I think we all do our best at logic, and I just think that our surrounding conditions and our genetics will warp some of that logic, even though it won't seem that way to us. So someone who seems the most logical person in the world will believe a completely opposing set of facts than another person who seems purely logical. There's something about our conditions that warp that. So I'm a big fan of logic, but whenever I think I'm being perfectly logical, I also remind myself, well, you could be kind of fooling yourself when you say that.
It's a good idea to run in front of another fan of logic.
Right.
And that's why I'm having this show.
Great.
If I'm wrong, I'd love to know that.
Yeah.
But I can't know it on my own, of course, for all the reasons you just stated.
Right. Yeah, we can't make any progress if we don't have like a room full of people, and there has to be some degree of trying to disprove each other. That has to be part of the group of people if you're going to make progress. So
right on.
So I'm all for it.
Yeah, a social set never advanced for people just agreeing with everything.
Right.
Never happened.
Yep.
Well, you've been a wonderful guest. I hope you'll find some time for this channel in your future. And please just ping me and say, hey, I've got a minute.
Okay, absolutely.
All right. You're welcome to stay to the end as I close this. No surprises going on here. Thank you very much, Richard Suttles. Man, if you ever do start making some contact, I'm going to turn everybody I know onto your channel.
Thank you very much.
I think you pre-deserved that.
Thank you.
In closing, I'd like to say to everyone, thanks for showing up. Pi and Iron and Krishna and Mac. And I have a horrible memory, and I'm going to glance through that. Jamie Russell. Yeah, that about winds it up. And what was it? RS. There it is. RS 5352.
That's actually my personal account. That's my personal account. Although
that's you.
Yeah, I have a Faithiest Atheist account too. I'm just not logged on to that computer right now.
Oh, okay. Well, I am very happy to meet RS 5352. That was my experience. It honestly was. All right. Thank you, everyone who came, everyone who may watch this in the future. I hope that this channel is providing something that will gnaw at your brain and make you think. I sure hope it is. And to the future, peace and respect to you all. And I want you all to know that I truly look forward to the day that we're all great friends. Till next time.